Alright, so in this project we are going to be building a very simple PayPal shopping cart. Well, I should say very simple, but minimal bells and whistles. Basically, I want to get you familiar with the CodeIgniter framework. That's what we'll be using here. And CodeIgniter is an MVC framework. And if you don't know what MVC is, it stands for Model View Controller. And it's actually kind of hard to explain, but it's basically a design pattern where your controller is basically the entry point for your application. The last project that we did, the Talking Space forum, was almost like an MVC framework because we had an entry file like topic.php. And then from that, we went to a library to use the database class and pull in information or even insert information into the database. And that's what a model does. Okay, a model deals with data, usually in a database, but not always. And then a view is just like a template in our last project. We called them templates, but they're essentially the same thing. It's just the display that the user interacts with. And the controller loads the view as well, just like in our last project, the base files that I actually called controllers a few times would load the template for us. All right, so this is the same thing, it's just a view. So this is basically the simplest diagram that I could find. So the browser interacts with the controller. So let's say we have a CodeIgniter app and it's called myapp.com. If we go to myapp.com/users, that's going to automatically bring us to the user's controller. Alright, usually we would have another slash and then something like register. So what this would do would bring us to the user's controller to the register method or function. Alright, it's all object oriented, it's all in classes. Controllers, models, they're all classes. And then if we wanted to pass a parameter in there, like, I don't know, a user with the ID of 19 or something like that, so it would be the user's controller, the register method in the user's controller, and then we'd pass in 19 to the register method as a parameter. Alright, so that's kind of how they're called routes. Alright, that's how CodeIgniter basically works with the browser. And if you've never used CodeIgniter or MVC, then you might be a little overwhelmed, but the application we're building really isn't that complicated, so you should be able to follow along okay. Alright, so the home site for CodeIgniter is ellislab.com. Alright, and there's just a ton of if we click on CodeIgniter, ton of documentation. If you do the project and you really like CodeIgniter, I definitely suggest going to the manual or the documentation, and if you click on table of contents, it just has everything. Class reference, so there's just a ton of different libraries that you can use. Input library, security, sessions, pagination, output, language, config, shopping cart class, which we'll be using. There's just a whole bunch. And then there's helper reference. Okay, so CodeIgniter uses helpers just like we did in our last application. File helpers, HTML, form validation. There's just a ton, and general topics, routes, controllers, models, views, URLs, things like that. So I definitely suggest, if you like CodeIgniter, to just basically go through this, the whole manual. Alright, you can learn a lot, and it's pretty easy to understand. I think, in my opinion, CodeIgniter is one of the easiest PHP frameworks to learn. And it's actually, I think I'd say it's my favorite framework, and I try to kind of write my custom PHP applications using some of the same principles that CodeIgniter uses. Alright, so what we're going to be building is a fairly simple shopping cart. Alright, and we're going to use CodeIgniter along with the cart library or cart class that CodeIgniter offers, which basically takes advantage of sessions to give you a nice shopping cart. All right, so basically we have a products page, and this is going to be a gaming site called the Gaming Place. It's just one of the first things that came to my mind, and I kind of wanted to have some kind of specific niche where all the products were related. Alright, so basically we have products and we have categories. Alright, so they're categorized into separate consoles: Xbox One games, PS4, Nintendo Wii, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, Nintendo Wii games, and other console games. Alright, and then down here we just have the most popular, which are the most purchased games. And here we can add games to our cart. Alright, we can change the quantity if we want. We can say we want 2, add to cart, and you can see over here we have a little cart in our sidebar that has the total, and we can actually update our cart through here as well. If we want to change it to 1, we can click update, and it actually brings us to our cart. And you can see that it has the title of the game, shipping costs, tax, which we can define in our configuration, and then the total. Alright, and to check out, you actually need to create an account. Alright, so you could create an account, go through, register, kind of like the last application we did. You'll just register and you'll immediately be able to log in. Alright, so we can log in here just to show you. Okay, so now we're logged in, and if we go to the cart, now we have a spot for shipping info. Alright, so we can fill that out, click checkout. Each product will go into an orders table, which will have the user ID that ordered the games. Each game, it'll have all the address stuff, so that the seller could ship the games. And then it's going to redirect to PayPal, and it's going to use we're going to use a PayPal class that allows us to use Express Checkout, and it doesn't just show up as one product with a total of all the games the user bought. It'll actually show each game in the PayPal user interface. All right, so the seller can actually log into PayPal and see exactly which products were purchased. And I'm just going to kind of use a general open source PayPal class. We're not going to actually create it from scratch because that would just take way too long, and I think it's just the level of coding is above this tutorial. All right, so we'll go to PayPal. They pay, gets sent back to the site, and that's that really. We're not going to have advanced features with this cart. I want to get it done in a minimal amount of videos. I don't want you to have to watch 100 videos. So that's really it. Just like with every other project, we'll develop the interface first, which again is using Bootstrap with some customization. So what we'll do is basically create an HTML template, design this, and then we'll get into developing the application. But before we build the interface, I just want to install CodeIgniter and just get it set up on our server. So if you go to ellislab.com/CodeIgniter, you just click the green download button. Alright, and it'll download. The latest version now is 2.2.0. Alright, so what we're going to do is, I'm using XAMPP, so we're going to go into htdocs, and let's see, I'm going to change the name of the gaming place so that we can use that folder name. Change that to done, and then we'll create our folder. and what we're going to do is open the CodeIgniter zip and take everything out except for we don't need the user guide, we don't need the license unless you want it. The user guide is actually an exact replication of the manual that's available on the CodeIgniter site. Well, I think it's an exact copy. I know that it has a lot of the same stuff. So now we have all of our application files. Basically, system we're not going to touch. It's just the core framework files. We don't need to touch that. Our application folder is where all the things that we're going to deal with. Alright, so we have our config files. You can see there's a bunch of them. We have autoloaders, so we don't have to manually load all our classes, configurations, database connection, routes, all kinds of things. Controllers, okay, that's where all our controllers will go. There's a welcome controller by default. Core, we don't really need to touch. Errors, helpers, libraries, which basically work like the libraries in our last application if we want to add custom ones. Models and views. Okay, so those are the main folders that we're going to be dealing with. So the first thing we want to do, I'm going to open up Notepad++ and go to the Gaming Place folder, application folder, and I'm going to open up in my config, I'm going to open up database.php, and just actually before we edit this, let's go create one. Alright, so I'm going to go to phpMyAdmin, and I'm going to create a database called Gaming Place. Okay, so now I'll go back to the database configuration file, and for username I'm going to put my database username, password, database is going to be Gaming Place. Alright, so that's all we have to do to configure our database. So we can save that and close that. Alright, so let's see what happens if we go to the front end. Localhost / the Gaming Place, and it gives us this default page. Alright, so it says this page is being generated dynamically by CodeIgniter. If you'd like to edit this page, you can find it located at, and then it gives you the view for the page, which is the welcome message view. Okay, it's in the views folder. And the controller for this is in the controllers folder called welcome.php. Now you can set a default controller. In this case it's welcome, and the default controller is accessed when you don't actually have a controller name here. Okay, if we put users here, it's going to go to the users controller. If we put welcome, it's going to go to the welcome control, or not. Actually, you know what? It's because we don't have search engine friendly URLs. By default, you need to have index.php and then / the controller name. So that takes us back to welcome. Now we don't want this. Alright, we want to be able to just go to our controller like this. Alright, so what we need to do is create a .htaccess file. Alright, and that'll allow us to rewrite our URLs to look better. Alright, so what we want to do here is in our application folder, actually you can see that the application folder has a .htaccess. This isn't the one we want. We actually want to put it in the root. Alright, so let's say new file and call it .htaccess. Alright, so I'm going to paste a block of code in here, and I can't really explain exactly what everything does. Just know that it rewrites our URLs to just to look. So I'm going to paste this in here. Alright, so basically people are not going to be able to access system files. Everything's going to go through the index.php file. Alright, and we can add exceptions, and we need exceptions for things like our images folder. Those should be accessible, CSS, JavaScript, our robots text file, favicon if we have one. These are all exceptions, and you can put new folder names in here if you want different things accessed directly through the browser. But otherwise, it's going to go through our index file. So if we go ahead and save this, all right, and then one other thing to do is go to the config and then routes. And down here, where is it? Maybe it's not routes. But you can see routes is where you define your default controller. In this case is welcome. Ultimately, our default controller is going to be products because we want products displayed on our home page. But I guess it's not routes. I think it's config then. Yeah, okay. So config.php, you can see this config index page. You want to take this away, okay? Just make this equal to nothing because we don't want to have index.php slash whatever. Alright, so that's good. Base URL, we should also put that in. In our case, or in my case, it's going to be localhost / the gaming place. Okay, so I'm going to put that in there. And you should also have the / at the end. Okay, so that's our base URL. So if we save this and now we try to reload this without index.php, it works. Okay, so now we can go directly to the controller and not have to put in index.php. Alright, so now that we have CodeIgniter installed and ready to go, in the next, I want to go to develop our user interface next, just because I just want to get that out of the way before we actually jump in and get into PHP mode.